So first of all, just a happy new year from everyone here at IPSE and welcome to the first Freelancer News Roundup of 2018. I'm joined by my colleague Tom Purvis, who's IPSE's economic and political advisor. Shortly we're going to be talking about some good news on the productivity front. But first to Westminster, where over the last week Theresa May has carried out a fairly large reshuffle of her cabinet. For many reasons, big or small, it was very eventful. There's lots of things that the self-employed might take particular interest in, various movements. But first, just generally, Tom, why did the Prime Minister announce this reshuffle?
So there's been a lot of pressure on the Prime Minister for quite some time now, essentially since the general election, to get some fresh faces in the cabinet, to promote younger backbenchers, and also to maintain the balance between Remainers and Brexiters within the cabinet. And I think that's what she has tried to do, and I do think her hand was forced somewhat, if you like. Now, what happened and what was rumoured ended up being very different things. But I do think there was this pressure to promote younger people to either a strategic role within Number 10 or a junior ministerial role. So, and I think Theresa May has listened to the backbenchers. She's felt that pressure and she's eventually said, okay, this is what I want to do. And that's what we've seen, and that's why she's done it in essence.
So of the appointments that will be particularly interesting for the self-employed, we saw Margot James, who was the Small Business Minister. She has departed and is the Digital Minister now and has been replaced in post by Andrew Griffiths. Relatively unknown to some, what do we think and hope that he will bring to the position?
So we hope that we can carry on the work that we were doing with Margot James, which was work on the Small Business Commissioner and working on issues such as late payment or in some cases no payment. So self-employment is obviously growing. It's now 4.8 million people work as a self-employed person, and we're seeing the growth of industries within the creative sector that are suffering from issues such as late payment and no payment far more than other industries. So we hope to work with the Small Business Minister on dealing with these issues and promoting a good environment for self-employed people to thrive.
Now in the same department, Greg Clark remained in post as Secretary of State for Business, which was rather surprising. A lot of people thought he was going to be on the move. Why was that?
So I think first of all, why was he expected to move was that there was all of these rumours that were going around prior to the actual reshuffle, whether Jeremy Hunt would move, whether Greg Clark would replace him as Health Secretary, things like that. And I personally think that it is quite good that the Business Secretary has remained in post. We've had the industrial strategy not too long ago, so I think it would have been quite damaging politically if she did then choose to move the Business Secretary, because it's kind of saying, oh, well, you've done this big piece of work and now leave, because we don't really want to touch that area anymore. We're now moving on to other things. So I think the fact that Greg Clark has stayed in his post means that we can work with him and his department around the industrial strategy and hopefully get a deal for self-employed people in the coming few years, essentially.
Okay. And in a second we'll move on to productivity, but one last question. Over the past few weeks, Paul Uppel has taken up his post as the Small Business Commissioner at IPSE. We're meeting with him next week and we're going to start developing a really close working relationship with him. What are his roles and responsibilities going to be?
So his roles and responsibilities are to essentially act as a regulator, if you like, sort of keeping an eye on what's going on within business and the relationship between large businesses and small businesses. And one of his areas of interest will be late payments and no payments. So that's where we're keen to work with him, because we're seeing quite a lot of people suffering from this issue. And the one thing that is killing businesses quite frequently in their early years is cash flow. And that is being compounded by late payment or no payment. So we're looking forward to working with him. His powers include things such as naming and shaming, and we're looking to Paul to really get his teeth into this issue to promote businesses setting up and then hopefully employing people down the line and growing the economy.
Now, on to productivity. In the last week, the ONS have released some statistics which, for the first time in a long time, shed some really good news on productivity. What did the statistics show? So
the figures showed that labour productivity grew by 0.9% and productivity within the public sector grew by 0.7%. So quite a large jump from what we've seen in the last few years, and it will be good news for the government, and it will also be good news for people when they go and check their bank at the end of the month.
For the first time since 2011, these productivity figures have increased at this rate. Why is productivity so important, and why is it so essential that the government addresses it?
So with productivity, if we're increasing productivity, it means that we're producing more with the same output. And what this will lead to is higher wages or higher day rates, and therefore better living standards for people. And at a time when inflation is 3.1% and wage rates aren't keeping up with inflation, it's important that we do drive productivity forward so we can drive wage growth, so that people will actually start to see more and more money in real terms in their pockets at the end of the month.
Historically, we've struggled with our productivity levels compared to other developed European countries. Why is this?
There are two reasons. There's business investment, which has been very weak in the UK since the financial crisis, and there's research and development spending, both from public and private sector. So on the business investment point, we're obviously going through a very interesting time with Brexit, and we are seeing Brexit mentioned in our Freelancer confidence index as a reason why people are losing confidence. So I feel business investment may remain relatively low until we've developed our relationship with the European Union and also the rest of the world. On research and development, it's just the fact that our sort of per capita spending, if you like, has been lower than our European counterparts, in particular Germany. However, we have identified industries such as life sciences, such as driverless cars and things like that, where we can be a market leader in the technology, and we're starting to see some of the results of investment in these industries from the government in collaboration with private sector companies. So fingers crossed we can deal with these issues and become a world leader in life sciences, driverless cars, as well as a whole host of other industries, because what that will do is put us in a very good position going into these negotiations with the European Union and also the rest of the world.
One last question. How important are the self-employed to consistently helping us boost our productivity levels?
So out of the 0.9% of productivity growth, the majority of that came from the service sector. And that is where the bulk of self-employment work. They operate within IT, within communications, within public relations, things like that. So if this trend continues and productivity continues to grow and it is driven by the service sector, then self-employed people have an incredibly important role to play. And it's important that the government does get self-employed people on side, because this productivity issue could make or break the government. If living standards are under pressure, that will lead to people voting for different parties. And the government is already relatively weak, so they can't afford that. So it's important that self-employed people are applauded for the work they've done so far, but the hard work isn't over yet, unfortunately. We've had years of stagnant growth, so it's important that we carry on cracking on and promoting these industries that are producing good results for the British economy.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's certainly been a very busy start to the year politically. Join us next week where we talk about more issues that are pertinent not only to self-employment but the wider political spectrum. Thank you.